Good afternoon, everybody. Joined by, obviously, Governor Cuomo and also Howard Glazer, State Operations, and Tom Condon, the Assistant Secretary of Energy. In September 2010, the NRC published its findings of an analysis that reevaluated the seismic hazards at 96 nuclear reactors at the central and eastern U.S. Using new seismic data and a review of plant design and structure, the NRC assigned a probabilistic estimate for the likelihood of each reactor being damaged by an earthquake. While the NRC found that all operating nuclear plants are safe, some seismic hazard estimates increased, including at Indian Point. This has triggered a further on-site specific review by the NRC of 27 plants, including Indian Point, to determine whether additional plant modifications will be necessary to reduce the identified risk level. And if I could go into, we just returned, we had a meeting today, a very productive meeting with senior NRC staff, and I also had a telephone conversation with the chair of the NRC, Greg Gasko. In that meeting and the phone calls, we agreed to several very important steps. First of all, Indian Point will be the NRC's top priority and will be reviewed first among the 27 nuclear plants which are being reviewed by the NRC. Second, the NRC will share its data regarding seismic activity specific to Indian Point. Third, state experts will join the NRC inspection team for on-site inspections at Indian Point. And the NRC chair has agreed to conduct a personal site inspection and visit of Indian Point with members of the governor's staff in the very near future. These are very good first steps as we have make sure that New York has the answers to these issues regarding Indian Point. And I want to thank Governor Cuomo for sending a team down to the NRC, and also Howard Glazer and Tom Condon for joining us. And I want to turn it over to Governor Cuomo.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First, I'd like to thank the Lieutenant Governor and the team that went down today for their swift response. I'd also like to thank the NRC for meeting with us on such short notice. For those of you who have followed the work that I've been doing for a few years, this is not the first time that we've had issues with the Indian Point power plant. As Attorney General, we had a number of issues with the power plant. My position has been for a long time that the plant is risky and the plant should not operate. So that was my position before. Having said that, I was surprised to learn of the significant seismic risk that the plant poses. We've had many, many conversations. We've been in litigation about this matter. But it's the first time, really, we've had the discussion about the significant seismic risk of the plant. Our point now, and the point of the meeting today, was to gather the facts. Let's get the information. This is an emotional topic. We want to make sure that before we reach any decisions, we have the facts, and they are solid facts. Questions such as, what is the seismic risk for that facility? If there is a significant risk, can it be mitigated? Are there factors that can be taken into consideration that can address the risk? Also, should the seismic risk be a factor in the relicensing decision that has to be made on the plant in 2013? One of the reactors is relicensed in 2013, which is basically a point in time where the NRC reevaluates the plant. And how is the seismic risk factor considered in that decision, if at all? We want to thank the NRC that this plant will be a top priority in the review is good news. That it will be a joint review is good news. This way the people of the state will have an independent source of evaluation, an independent source of information, and that is good news. I would like to read you from a letter that I sent to the NRC, if I might. The NRC's failure to consider safety issues in the relicensing of nuclear power plants is dangerously irresponsible, especially after a recent earthquake in Japan forced the emergency shutdown of the world's largest nuclear plant and resulted in the release of radioactive material into the air and water. This letter signals our call for the NRC to thoroughly review terrorism vulnerability, seismic issues, and other significant concerns in the relicensing process. I sent that letter to the NRC, except I sent that letter to the NRC in 2007 as the Attorney General after an earthquake in Japan. At that time had damaged one of the nuclear power plants. This is not a new situation. This is not a new issue. It is imperative that we get it right, and that's why we brought the urgency to the matter, and we will continue our diligence on this matter until we have all the facts and all the information. I once again want to thank the Lieutenant Governor and the team, and we will keep you informed as we go forward. Questions, comments?
Time frame given for when this inspection would begin and when the information would be released?
It is a top priority, Ken. I don't think we can give you a time frame now. It's going to be it's top priority for the NRC. It's going to be a joint review. We have to identify people on our side. We want to get the best talent that we can, the best experts that we can. But the NRC assures us that it will be expeditious, quote unquote, and as soon as we have time frames, we'll let you know.
Does the state have the authority to prevent the plant from licensing if these reviews and studies are not to your satisfaction?
That was the subject of much discussion as Attorney General, when I was Attorney General. Basic answer, although it's not a legal answer, let's say, for this purpose, but the basic answer that we came to was no. It's a federal licensing procedure, and the state is preempted by the federal government. And our argument was going to the criteria that the NRC uses in the relicensing, which we thought were narrow and not broad enough. And that was the letter that I read to you, was the 2007 letter saying to the NRC, you should look for things like vulnerability to a terrorist attack, like seismic risk, because it was just after an earthquake in Japan, believe it or not.
Was the subject of evacuation, did that come up at all?
Lieutenant Governor, did evacuation come up?
Discussed, but no decisions made on any changes.
It's not among the three things that you're looking at right now?
No. This is about seismic risk. Evacuation is a topic that we discussed at length also. Westchester County at that time. Larry Schwartz, by the way, was the deputy county executive at that time. Westchester County wouldn't certify the evacuation plan. You know, the problem with this plant, it's different than a basic or generic conversation on nuclear power. It's a nuclear power plant in this location. In this location. And when you're talking about the circle of evacuation, 10 miles, 15 miles, 20 miles, now in Japan we're talking about 50 miles, okay? If you were talking about 50 miles from the Indian Point power plant, you're talking all of New York City. You're talking about parts of Connecticut. You're talking about Long Island. You're talking about New Jersey. By some estimates, 6% of the nation's population would be in that zone. So evacuation, I don't believe, is even a feasible concept when you're talking about this plant in this area with this density.
We also have a freight line that goes right alongside, not across the river where the passenger line is, but right on the site of the nuclear power plant. If there were to be an accident there, what would happen?
No, it's true. We were talking about one time about the terrorist attack and the vulnerability to a terrorist attack. I agree. I've been making this argument for many, many years.
What did the NRC tell you about this earthquake risk? The number has been quoted that it's 1 in 10,000. Did they explain that or put it into any kind of...
It is a significant risk. The 1 in 10,000, I believe they adjusted somewhat to 1 in 13,000. Is that right? And the
year, or is it the likelihood
per year? And the 1 in 10,000, Bill, I believe was the lowest threshold that they said didn't pose an immediate risk. Is that correct? Governor? The news media said it was 1 in 10,000. And 1 in 10,000 coincidentally was the standard at which you pose an immediate risk, right? So they both happened to be 1 in 10,000. That was the standard, and that's what Indian Point was. Not 1 in 9,998, 1 in 10,000. Today, the NRC said it wasn't 1 in 10,000, it was 1 in 13,000.
I'm sorry, did you, in the long time that you've dealt with NRC, did you detect any different tone now following the Japanese earthquake? And do you have any kind of a parameter of when there could be some resolution? A year, 6 months?
Mike, I wasn't at the meeting, so I can't say. From the accounts, from the Lieutenant Governor's account, I believe they're trying to be cooperative and they're trying to act in an expeditious fashion. My disagreement with the NRC was and continues to be the criteria for relicensing. You know, their position is when we go to relicense a facility, it's not like we take a whole new look at the complex or we do a whole new risk assessment. They see it more as an update on the physical plant capacity. And my position was, no, things have happened, there's new information, the world has changed, reevaluate, and look at the situation and decide whether or not you should grant this facility a license today, with what you know today. Who cares what you knew when you originally licensed it? Given what you know today, should that plant be licensed today? What you know about terrorism today? What you know about seismic risks today?
Any indication, though, that they're changing at all, their attitude or their perception?
That was really not the topic of today. And the relicensing criteria is more a question of the law, Mike, and what they'll say is, well, look, this is the legal standard of relicensing.
In 2007, you called for an immediate...
I'm sorry, I cut off. Did I cut off someone? Ken, did I cut you
Well, I
off?
was going to say, just following up on that.
It's okay if I cut you off. I was just wondering.
But-
I intended to cut you off.
Just following up on that question, if, as AG, you opposed the relicensing and you thought it should be shut down, regardless of what they find, you know, whether it's safe seismically or not, do you still believe it should be shut down? I mean, what has changed?
My position hasn't changed. That's why I stated it at the beginning, Ken. My position hasn't changed. This is a new factor in a new situation, apart and aside from whether or not the facility should be relicensed. I'm sorry, Mr. Kaplan.
The state economy, if it was shut
Can
down.
I just, now, I did cut off Mr. Kaplan, that I'm sure.
A similar question. You had said in 2007 you wanted the plant shut down at that time. Is 2013 okay at this point, or are you calling for a shutdown sooner than that?
What I'm saying is there's a new question, which is what is the seismic risk for this facility and what does that mean? What is the risk? What can you do about it? Can it be mitigated? How serious is it? And that's a question that we need solid information. It's not a question of opinion. It's a question of information and data. And let's go out and get that, and let's get it as quickly as possible. That's why the NRC is saying that this will be the top priority, not a top priority. I used to work in Washington for a lot of years. Words matter. It's not a top priority, it's the top priority, and the state will be a part of the evaluation with our personnel. That's very important. So we'll have information in an expeditious time frame, and we understand the necessary time constraints of a situation like this, but an expeditious time frame, given the nature, and it will be joint, so we'll have confidence in the information, and then let's see what the information says, and then we'll make a decision.
Governor, do you feel that there's enough capacity in the state's power grid, or just enough power available to absorb the loss of Indian Point? That's one of the arguments that supporters of the plant make.
Yeah, yes. If you conclude, Glenn, that the facility posed a safety risk, you would find the power, right? I mean, no one would say you have a nuclear plant in one of the most dense places on the globe to have a nuclear facility. It poses a significant risk, but we're going to let it keep operating anyway because we don't want to deal with the replacement issue. If there's a safety risk, you have to find the replacement power, which is a real issue. plant generates about 2,000 megawatts. Now, is it replaceable? Yes, but you would have to replace it. Well, where do you get the 2,000 megawatts? You replace it. You have 3,000 megawatts that's already been permitted. You have another 3,000 megawatts in capacity that is pending permitting. Maybe you could even get wild and think that you'll reduce demand and you'll have some efficiency. But I've rejected historically, and I continue to reject the position, well, it's 2,000 megawatts of power. We need the power. Who cares what the risk is? That's what that argument comes down to me. And I reject that argument.
Was the state making any preparations or any contingencies for the fact if the NRC does say close the plants, do we have any plans in place or making plans for that?
That's a very, very big if at this point. No.
Governor, Kyle Hughes here. Do you think that this situation at any point strengthens the argument for permitting hydrocracking, mining gas as a replacement power source in the area?
Kyle, I don't think so. I don't think it has an effect. I think there is a similarity between the two issues in that they both tend to be emotional issues, and on both issues I'm saying I understand the emotion, I understand the passion, I understand the fear, frankly. Let's get the information first. Let's get the information first. Hydrofracking is much the same that way. Let's get the report, let's get the information, let's make our determinations based on sound information, not on emotion. I understand the emotion about Indian Point. I understand the emotion about hydrofracking. Both cases, I'm saying, let's get the information. And by the way, on both cases, we're working expeditiously to get sound, independent information to make a judgment upon.
I'm a little confused on your position on Indian Point. In the fall, in one of your campaign books on energy, you said replace Indian Point when alternative power can be found. Are you saying now that the alternative power sources are available and Indian Point should be shut down? Or are you not saying that?
You do not have at this time replacement power for Indian Point. Could you have replacement power for Indian Point? Yes. Well, you would have to build it. You would have to build it. But what I'm saying, Fred, is if you concluded, let's say you get the report back on Indian Point, and the report says there is a significant risk here, and we don't recommend further operating of this plant. If that was the conclusion, would anyone say, sorry, we have to continue to operate it because we need the 2,000 megawatts and we can't figure out how to replace it? No. I don't think any reasonable person would say that. That's what I'm saying.
How do you define significant risk? I mean, we have this number, 1 in 13,000. How do you decide whether that's too much to live with or okay?
Well, I think that's part of the study, Bill. Now, the NRC will say 1 in 10,000 requires immediate action. Now, what is the immediate action? It's probably risk mitigation. But that's going to be part of the conversation. What is a significant risk? Can you do anything about a significant risk? And what risk are you willing to live with? That's what it's going to come down to at the end of the day. What risk are you willing to live with? And then we'll have the argument, well, on one hand, you're getting 2,000 megawatts of power. On the other hand, you have some risk. And we'll balance those two, have the conversation about the potential of replacement power, which, by the way, you could find replacement power if you wanted to find replacement power. You're talking about a transmission line from Lake Champlain down the Hudson. You can build a power plant. You really can. I know this is the state of New York. I understand that, but you could do it, right? Stranger things have happened. At one time, we knew how to do it. At one time, you had an Article 10 siting process, right? So you could do it. And if this was a significant risk, you would do it. Any questions on any other topics?
Governor, 50,000 state employees next month are scheduled to get their step increases and longevity payments. Should those payments be made, and are you discussing that in contract negotiations with the unions?
We have ongoing contract negotiations, Jimmy, that I don't think we're going to speak about in the press. I don't know if that is part of the negotiation or not. Howard, would you know?
There are a number of matters that are subject to collective bargaining. We've agreed not to talk about the specific matters at this point.
And should those payments go forward?
See, it's part of the discussion, and we're not going to have the contract negotiations in the press.
Governor Tom Livis in the Senate equated education and health care with prison closure, saying that's the top concerns for his conference. Is there any concern that that could hold up the budget process at all? And talking with the
Yes.
What's the status there on the prison closures?
Well, you know, Nick, there are only 3 issues on the budget: prisons, education, and health care. Yeah, but usually there are only 2 issues on the budget: education and health care, right? And education and health care are everything. Now you have education, health care, and prisons. So these are major issues, and these are historically, these are the difficult issues to deal with. Education and health care, first of all. Prisons is relatively new to the budget process, right? For many years we were building prisons, and the question was, where would you site the facility? And communities wanted the facility sited because they wanted the economic activity, et cetera. So it's a significant problem. They're all significant problems.
Governor, today the protest outside of the teachers' unions, they said that your budget was immoral. Any reaction to that? And also, is there any chance that you see at this point of increasing school aid from your position?
We have, as part of the budget discussions that we're having with the Assembly and the Senate, they have their budget positions. We have our budget positions. And we are discussing alternatives. The Assembly and the Senate both have suggested restoring a certain amount of aid to education. There are significant Medicaid issues that we're discussing, so it's all on the table.
Governor, the bill was reported out of the Finance Committee today about creating a legislative budget office, and part of that bill would reallocate $10 million from the executive branch budget office to this legislative budget office. Any thoughts? It's sponsored by Senator Skelos. Any thoughts and comments about that? Is there a constitutional problem from one branch of government to another?
Yeah, I don't know if it raises a constitutional issue. We haven't discussed it. It hasn't come up in our conversations. And I'm sure if it's a priority for the senator, he'll bring it up.
Last week you were pretty optimistic on the budget talks about an on-time budget. Can you update us where the talks are, whether you're still optimistic?
I'm optimistic, Ken, because I have to be. I'm the governor of the state of New York, right? I couldn't have run for this job or function in this job if I wasn't an optimist, right? We're going to change the dysfunction. We're going to change the pattern. We're going to change the history. We're going to do what hasn't been done in decades. So I'm an optimist. As a realist, you want the realist's answer? We have significant issues: education, Medicaid, prison closings. You have 2 types of issues within them. You have money issues, dollars and cents, and then you have policy issues. The money issues in some ways are easier in this budget. Why? Because there's less flexibility. Why? Because we don't have any money. So you don't have a lot of leeway in terms of the dollars. So in some ways, the dollars are actually the easier part of the equation. The quote-unquote policy issues, prison closings, medical malpractice caps, living wage, number of issues that I put in the budget that are priorities for me, the SAGE bill, the consolidation of the insurance and banking bill. These are major, they're not dollar issues, but they're major policy issues. And these are positions that I told the people of the state of New York that I would accomplish. And I'm going to accomplish them, one way or the other. And that, to me, is what drives all of this. I never, in my campaign, you covered me with all that microscopic attention. I never said I'm going to get you an on-time budget. I never said elect me and I'm going to work it out with Sheldon Silver and Dean Skelos. I said, elect me and I will get these things done. I am not as concerned with the means. I'm concerned with the end.
Are they negotiating in good faith, in your view?
I think everybody in good faith. You know, that's a question of that's a question for Gormley. That's a morality question. That's a soul question. You know, I don't do that. They are cooperative. They are collegial. We're having good conversations. These are difficult issues. And in truth, Ken, I come with a very specific agenda. I came with, and I said this to you in the campaign, I was very specific. All those books that you kidded me about, I was very specific in what I said I was going to do. And I want to honor that promise and that pledge to the people. And that happens in this budget. This is where the rubber meets the road. And we have to accomplish those priorities. Now, is there flexibility on a lot of issues? Yes, but on the essential priorities, no. There really isn't.
One more optimistic assessment, the realistic assessment. What's your cynical assessment?
Never happened. Never happened. Why is it going to change? It's never happened before. We'll go to the extenders. That's the cynical assessment.
Governor, just to clarify with your little conversation with Ken, are you backing off your optimism at all of an on-time budget from a week ago?
I am optimistic. I'm an optimist by nature, okay? And by job description. I am an optimist. And I am hopeful that we could get it on time amicably. As a realist, okay, multifaceted, as a realist, what is important for me to accomplish for the people is to actually get a good budget. You know, an on-time budget. What does an on-time budget do for you, by the way? On-time budget, the only people in the state who understand what an on-time budget means are in this room. We got an on-time budget. Who answers that on-time budget? What does that mean, on-time budget? Is it a good budget? Is it a bad budget? Is it a help me budget? Is it an Albany Insider budget? I want a good budget. On time, 2 men, 3 men, 2 men and a woman, you know, it doesn't matter. These are all means to an end. The end is what is important. And it has to be a good budget, and that's my priority, and that's what I told the people I was going to get done. That's what I'm going to get done. Either amicably on time, or through the quote-unquote extender method, or whatever it takes, Mike. Whatever it takes.
That does sound different from a few days ago.
No, I'm still an optimist. I'm hopeful that we get it done on time. As a realist, I'm telling you, it's good. A good budget is what is important, as opposed to the quote-unquote methodology of the budget, because really with the extenders, it changes the equation. Bill Hammond had a piece on this today. I spoke to him about it yesterday. In the old days, it was a different calculus, because if you didn't reach an agreement, then it was Groundhog Day. Then everyone sat there day after day after day for long periods of time until you did get an agreement. There was only one option. The 3 parties agree. That was the only option. There's a new option. It's the 3 parties agree, or they agree to disagree in a very dramatic fashion, which is the governor doesn't extend their budget, and if they really disagree, they shut down the government. You really disagree, and you really want to stop it, then you shut down the government. That's a totally different option. I dealt with that option in Washington with Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich, right? We were there many, many years ago on frankly, a much higher scale. So that's a different option. It's an expeditious option. In many ways, it's a more clear option for the people. You really believe what you're saying? You really don't want to do it? Good. Well, then I'll send you a bill. It'll be an extended bill. You don't want to do it? Don't pass it. Shut down the government, and then let's take the case to the people. And I am confident in taking the case to the people. Why? Because I did already. That was my campaign. I had this conversation with the people. I know what they want. And now I just have to follow through on what I told them I would do.
Can you clarify where you stand on the inclusion of some of these tangential issues such as rent control, property tax cap? Should they be in or not?
I would like to see rent control and property tax cap in the budget. I don't believe it's going to happen. As a realist, as an optimist, I still hope that it would happen. As a realist, I don't think it will happen.
Is it something you're advocating for behind the scenes?
Yes.
Did you include rent control?
Yes. It is something I am advocating for, including in the budget. Now, it is a complex topic, and there is a prevailing, another feeling that it's too complex to add into the budget at this time, because you have both the property tax cap equation, you then have the rent stabilization equation, you then have the 421A, which is a linked issue. So it's complicated. And some people feel that it's too complicated to add into the budget at this time.
Are you linking these issues now? Because I remember a few weeks back you told us that you shouldn't link these two issues, that was old.
Those are tangential issues. You know, in Albany, nothing is linked, everything is linked. These are tangential issues that are discussed together. Ethics reform is another major priority. I'm just thinking, well, what did I say to the people that we have to deliver on, that I have to deliver on? The budget, ethics reform. Ethics reform obviously will not be in the budget. So we're not going to get the entire year's work done in the budget. Ethics reform will not be done. Probably property tax cap, 421A, rent stabilization won't be done.
Are you supporting extending rent control or extending and expanding rent regulations? Because obviously the Assembly would like to not only extend it, but expand the...
I would like to extend and expand.
In what way?
Well, that's part of the negotiation.
Governor, SUNY's Board of Trustees today voted for a 5-year tuition plan. Is that something you can answer as either a realist, an optimist, a cynic, or yourself?
Can I answer as a reporter?
No.
Oh, come on, just once. Rational tuition?
5-year, and then put it in a lockbox for the campuses.
I look forward. I understand the concept. I think there's a lot of merit to the concept, and I look forward to discussing it with the Chancellor and the Assembly and the Senate.
Governor, how much...
But I do think, Jimmy, there's merit to the concept. You know, the political process, I believe, has proven that it is not effective as a consistent budgeting device, right? When you do budgeting, whether it's for SUNY or state operations, consistency, predictability, lack of eccentricity, these are all important. And a political body doing this on a year-to-year basis tends not to do it well, in my opinion, and that's rational tuition.
Governor, how much pushback have you gotten from the legislative leaders about your Economic Development Council's plan, because it's taking money that used to be used almost as member items, essentially, and handed out that way? Is that something, how important is it to you to change that process?
They have mentioned that process to me. It's not like member items. Their position is that they had previously awarded capital grant programs that were theirs, and in our budget we swept those accounts and took money that was theirs. That's their basic argument. Sounds pretty convincing, doesn't it?
Should we be negotiating this budget in public? I mean, have there been any public leaders meetings? You campaign on transparency.
Well, you are. You are. What's supposed to be happening now is you're supposed to be having committee meetings and conferences where the two houses are discussing issues and going back and forth and closing down differences wherever they can. That is what is supposed to be happening now. That's in the design of how to do a budget, right, 2007, that's what you're supposed to be doing. And that's what you are now doing. With some success, I might add. See, the money issues, it's interesting. The money issues really are in some ways easier this year than the policy issues. And I think you see that with these conference committees. But the policy issues probably are equally important with the money issues.
Governor, is there an agreement? Economic Development Council and that money, is that, if some people say just don't spend it at all because it's debt, it's borrowed money, you want to spend it on the council, but, why not just not spend it?
I need funding to do economic development projects. I need funding to do economic development projects. Probably the most important thing that I can do as governor is spend time on economic development. Bob Duffy and I have had the conversation many times. The majority, if we do these jobs, our respective jobs well, the majority of our time, if you get our timesheet at the end of the year, if we kept one, the majority of the time should be in economic development activities. I think it's the greatest single thing that I can do for the state and the lieutenant governor can do for the state. The councils are the instrumentality for those economic development programs. And you need economic development capital to make those programs work. The Senate's point is we didn't need to take theirs. That's basically their point, with some dramatic flourish added. There is an argument to be made there.
Governor, is there agreement on the finer points of the Department of Financial Regulation?
No.
It's specifically funding the consumer protection arm using penalties levied on banks. Is there agreement on that?
No.
And what's the sticking point?
We're close. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. Thanks.